City Mouse and Country Mouse. One day, the country mouse was expecting his cousin from the city to come and visit. Knock knock. The country mouse ran towards the door excitedly. "Hello, dear cousin," he said, and gave his cousin a big hug and made him sit down at a late table. "I'm so glad to see you. Come on, let's have dinner, and you tell me how life is treating you." "My dearest cousin, thank you for your warm welcome," the city mouse said. He took a quick look at the table, which had only a few dry berries and walnuts on it. "Come, visit me, and I will give you such a wonderful treat that you will never want to come back to the country again." After a few days, the country mouse visited his cousin in the city. His cousin met him near a big store. The store had fruits, bread, cheese, and many other things. The country mouse was astonished. "Let's have a real dinner now, dear cousin," the city mouse said, and was just about to tuck in when a cat attacked the dinner table. The two mice had to wait for the cat to take what she wanted and leave. "Oh, this was close. Things like this shouldn't bother you too much. It's a part of city life," said the town mouse apologetically. They tried again.
Stone soup. A kindly old stranger was walking through the land when he came upon a village. As he entered, the villagers moved towards their homes, locking doors and windows. The stranger smiled and asked, "Why are you all so frightened? I am a simple traveler, looking for a soft place to stay for the night, and a warm place for a meal." "There's not a bite to eat," he was told. "We are weak and our children are hungry." "Oh, I have everything I need," he said. "In fact, I was thinking of making some stone soup to share with all of you." He pulled an iron cauldron from his cloak, filled it with water, and began to build a fire under it. Then, with great ceremony, he drew an ordinary-looking stone from a silken bag and dropped it into the water. By now, hearing the rumor of food, most of the villagers had come out of their homes or watched from their windows. As the stranger sniffed the broth and licked his lips in anticipation, hunger began to overcome their fear. "Ah," said the stranger, "I do like a tasty stone soup. Of course, stone soup with cabbage. That's much better." Soon, a villager approached hesitantly, holding a small cabbage. He added it to the pot. "Wonderful!" cried the stranger. "You know, I once had stone soup with cabbage and a bit of salt beef as well, and it was fit for a king." The village butcher managed to find some salt beef, and so it went through potatoes, onions, carrots, mushrooms, and so on, until there was indeed a delicious meal for everyone in the village to share. The villager elder offered the stranger a great deal of money for the magical stone, but he refused to sell it and traveled on the next day. As he left, the stranger came upon a group of village children standing near the road. He gave the silken bag to the youngest child and whispered to him that it was not the stone, but the villagers that had performed the magic. By working together, with everyone contributing what they can, a greater good is achieved. Stone Soup. A kindly old stranger was walking. The North Wind and the Sun. The North Wind and the Sun met far above the earth and had a great argument. "I am stronger than you," roared the North Wind. "Oh, no, you're not," said the Sun. For weeks they went on and argued. Neither the Sun nor the North Wind would give up. They became so wrapped up in their argument that they ignored their jobs. The North Wind didn't blow and the Sun didn't shine. In the end, they decided that they had to settle their argument before something dreadful happened on the earth. They agreed that the first of them to separate a certain traveler from his cloak could consider himself the strongest. The North Wind tried first. He attacked the poor traveler and tried his hardest to tear the cloak from the man's body. He failed. All that he did was to make the man hug his cloak closer to him for protection. "It's impossible," groaned the North Wind. "If I can't separate that man from his cloak with all of my strength, I'm sure that you won't be able to do that, Sun." The Sun didn't answer. He merely carried on smiling. He smiled down on the traveler below him. His smile began to make the traveler feel warm. Before long, the traveler felt very, very hot and stopped hugging the cloak to him and let it fall open. The Sun's smile grew warmer and warmer, and soon the traveler threw his cloak back behind him so that it hung from his shoulders. Still the Sun smiled. The earth grew hotter and hotter. Everything began to wilt and droop in the enormous heat. In the end, the traveler knew that he did not need his cloak at all. He took it off and trailed it in the dust behind him. The Sun turned to the North Wind. He still said nothing, but his smile grew even wider. It is sometimes possible to gain by persuasion what cannot be gained by mere force.
Once upon a time, in a large country house, there lived a cat. She was very alert and active. The mice living in the basement of the house were frightened and worried, as their numbers were lessening with each passing day.
"The cat poses an immense danger to us. We are losing our members every day,"
declared a young mouse that had just lost his dearest friend to the cat.
"Let us hold a council of mice. We will make a plan that will save us from the dreadful cat,"
suggested an elderly mouse. The meeting, held behind closed doors, went on for hours. Several plans were made and dismissed. They could not reach a foolproof plan of action. Just as they were about to give up, one young mouse stood up and said in a timid voice,
"I have a plan."
"What do you suggest we do, young one?"
asked the head of the council.
"If the cat were to wear a bell around her neck, then it would ring every time she took a step. The tinkling sound would be a signal for us to scatter away and escape from her."
There were murmurs of approval from the audience, followed by a loud applause at the young mouse's plan. As the applause died down, an old mouse, grey and wrinkled, stood up to command the attention of the council. He said,
"The plan is indeed an admirable one. Clever, but unfortunately not well thought through." "Why do you say that, wise one?"
asked the head of the council.
The plan has one big problem.
Continued the old mouse.
Which is?
Asked the head curiously.
Who will put the bell on the cat?
With that, the whole council fell silent.
Why the sun and moon live in the sky. Many years ago, the sun and water were great friends, and both lived on the earth together. The sun very often used to visit the water, but the water never returned his visits. At last, the sun asked the water why it was that he never came to see him in his house, and the water replied that the sun's house was not big enough, and that if he came with his people, he would drive the sun out. He then said, "If you wish me to visit you, you must build a very large house, but I warn you, it will have to be a tremendous place, as my people are very, very numerous and take up a lot of room." The sun promised to build a very large house, and soon afterwards he returned home to his wife, the moon, who greeted him with a broad smile when he opened the door. The sun told the moon what he had promised the water, and the next day commenced building a huge house in which to entertain his friend. When it was completed, he asked the water to come and visit him the next day. When the water arrived, he called out to the sun and asked him whether it would be safe for him to enter, and the sun answered, "Yes, come in, my friend." The water then began to flow in, accompanied by the fish and all the water animals. Very soon, the water was knee-deep, so he asked the sun if it was still safe, and the sun again said, "Yes," so more water came in. When the water was level with the top of a man's head, the water said to the sun, "Do you want more of my people to come?" And the sun and the moon both answered yes, not knowing any better. So the water flowed on until the sun and the moon had to perch themselves on the top of the roof. Again, the water addressed the sun, but receiving the same answer and more of his people rushing in, the water very soon overflowed the top of the roof, and the sun and the moon were forced to go up into the sky, where they have remained ever since.
The Crow and the Fox. One bright morning, a crow was flying around and saw a piece of cheese on a windowsill.
Oh, cheese! Yummy! Even if my friends beg me, I'm not sharing.
The crow quickly took the cheese in his beak and flew off high in the sky. After flying far, far away, the crow landed on a branch.
I've never seen a bird as beautiful as you.
Upon hearing these wonderful words, the crow immediately began to look around.
Huh?
And how do you keep your feathers so lustrous?
The crow could see the fox under the tree praising him.
You can't fool me. I know you're just after my cheese,
thought the crow. He quickly turned his head and pretended not to hear the fox's words.
Now all you need is a beautiful singing voice, and you will be seen as the most amazing crow ever.
Then the fox turned around as if she were planning to leave. Now the crow was determined to show off his voice and sing for the fox as loud as he could. Just as the crow opened his mouth, the cheese fell from his beak onto the ground. The fox ran for the fallen piece of cheese and took it in her mouth.
Thanks, Crow.
The crow realized he had finally fallen for the fox's trick, but it was too late.
My cheese!
Since then, all of the mice haven't had any peace. So the mice decided to quickly gather for a town meeting to be rid of this cat.
No.
Stone Soup. A kindly Why the bear has a short tail. One cold morning, when the fox was coming up the road with some fish, he met a bear. "Good morning, Mr. Fox," said the bear. "Good morning, Mr. Bear," said the fox. "The morning is brighter because I have met you." "Those are very good fish, Mr. Fox," said the bear. "I have not eaten such fish for many a day. Where do you find them?" "I have been fishing, Mr. Bear," answered the fox. "If I could catch such fish as those, I should like to go fishing, but I do not know how to fish." "It would be very easy for you to learn, Mr. Bear," said the fox. "You are so big and strong that you can do anything. Come to this pond, and I will show you how to fish through the ice." So the fox and the bear went to the frozen pond, and the fox showed the bear how to make a hole in the ice. "This is easy for you," said the fox, "but many an animal could not have made that hole. Now comes the secret. You must put your tail down into the water and keep it there. That is not easy, and not any animal could do it, for the water is very cold, but you are a learned animal, Mr. Bear, and you know that the secret of catching fish is to keep your tail in the water for a long time. Then, when you pull it up, you will pull it up with as many fish as I have." The bear put his tail down into the water, and the fox went away. It began to get dark, and the bear said, "Now I will pull the fish out of the water. How good they will be!" He pulled and pulled, but not a fish came out. Worse than that, not all of his tail came out, for the end of it was frozen fast to the ice. He went slowly down the road, growling angrily. "I wish I could find that fox." But the cunning fox was curled up in his warm nest, and whenever he thought of the bear, he laughed.
The Ugly Duckling. A little duckling was very sad because he thought he was the ugliest amongst all his brothers and sisters. They would not play with him and teased the poor ugly duckling. One day, he saw his reflection in the water and cried, "Nobody likes me. I am so ugly." He decided to leave home and went far away into the woods. Deep in the forest, he saw a cottage in which there lived an old woman, her hen, and her cat. The duckling stayed with them for some time, but he was unhappy there and soon left. When winter set in, the poor duckling almost froze to death. A peasant took him home to his wife and children. The poor duckling was terrified of the children and escaped. The ugly duckling spent the winter in a marshy pond. Finally, spring arrived. One day, the duckling saw a beautiful swan swimming in the pond and fell in love with her. But then he remembered how everyone made fun of him, and he bent his head down in shame. When he saw his own reflection in the water, he was astonished. He was not an ugly duckling anymore, but a handsome young swan. Now he knew why he looked so different from his brothers and sisters. They were ducklings, but I was a baby swan, he said to himself. He married the beautiful swan and lived happily ever after.
The Wolf and His Shadow. A wolf left his lair one evening in fine spirits and an excellent appetite. As he ran, the setting sun cast his shadow far out on the ground, and it looked as if the wolf were 100 times bigger than he really was. "Why," exclaimed the wolf proudly, "see how big I am! Fancy me running away from a puny lion! I'll show him who is fit to be king, he or I." Just then, an immense shadow blotted him out entirely, and the next instant a lion struck him down with a single blow. Do not let your fancy make you forget realities. The Wild Boar and the Fox. A wild boar was sharpening his tusks busily against the stump of a tree when a fox happened by. Now, the fox was always looking for a chance to make fun of his neighbors, so he made a great show of looking anxiously about, as if in fear of some hidden enemy. But the boar kept right on with his work. "Why are you doing that?" asked the fox at last with a grin. "There isn't any danger that I can see." "True enough," replied the boar. "But when danger does come, there will not be time for such work as this. My weapons will have to be ready for use then, or I shall suffer for it. Preparedness for war is the best guarantee of peace." The Little Match Girl. It was very cold one winter's evening. The snow fell and it was almost dark. It was the last day of the year. A little match girl was walking down the street. Her name was Gretchen. She had no hat and no cloak. She was very cold. Gretchen had a lot of matches in her old apron. She had a little bunch in her hand, but she couldn't sell her matches because no one would buy them. Poor little Gretchen. She was cold and hungry. The snow fell on her hair, but she did not think about that. She saw lights in the houses and smelled good things cooking. She said to herself, "This is the last night of the year." Gretchen got colder and colder, and she was afraid to go home. She knew her dad would whip her if she did not take some money to him. So Gretchen sat down on a doorstep. Her little hands were almost frozen. She took her match and lit it to warm her hands. The match looked a little like a candle. Gretchen thought she was sitting by a big stove. It was so bright. She put the match near her feet to warm them. Then the little light went out. She didn't think she was by the stove anymore. So Gretchen lit another match. Now she thought she could look into a room, and in this room was a table full of food. The light went out and she was in the cold again. So Gretchen lit a third match. She thought she was sitting by a Christmas tree. Very many candles were on the tree, and it was full of pretty things. Then she saw a star fall. "Someone is dying," said little Gretchen. Her grandma had been very good to the little girl, but she was dead. The grandma had said, "When a star falls, someone is going to heaven." The little girl lit another match. It made a big light. Gretchen thought she saw her grandma. She never looked so pretty before. She looked so sweet and happy. "Oh, Grandma," said the little girl, "take me. When the light goes out, you will go away. The stove and the turkey and the Christmas tree, they all went away." So Gretchen lit a bunch of matches. She wanted to keep her grandma with her. The grandma took the little girl in her arms. They went up, up, where they would never be cold or hungry. The next day came. Some men found the little girl in the street. She was dead. In her hand were the burned matches. They said, "Poor little thing, she froze to death." They didn't know how happy she was with her grandma.
The Lion and the Mouse. A lion was sleeping under a tree. A naughty rat came and started to jump on the lion's body. The lion got disturbed. He caught the rat in his paw and roared. The rat was scared. He requested the lion, "Let me go. I will help you someday." The lion laughed at this and said, "You are too small to help me. Anyways, you can go." One day, the lion was trapped in the hunter's net. He roared loudly. Hearing his voice, the rat came out of his hole. He quickly ignored the net and set the lion free. The lion said to the rat, "Thank you. I was wrong. Even two small creatures can do a big job."
The Hound and the Hare. A hare was playing happily on her own in a field when suddenly a dog came bounding up to her. The hare squealed with terror, thinking that the hound would kill her. The great dog snapped at her with his teeth. The hare closed her eyes, expecting the worst. To her surprise, the dog did not bite her. Instead, he stopped snapping at her. The hare opened her eyes and looked at the dog. "Come and play with me," invited the dog, wagging his tail. "Certainly not," snapped the hare. "I wouldn't dream of it." "Why not?" asked the disappointed hound. "Because I don't know what to make of you," replied the hare. "If you are my friend, why do you try to bite me? And if you are my enemy, why do you want to play with me? We would like people to show themselves to us as they really are." The Hares and the Frogs. Hares, as you know, are very timid. The least shadow sends them scurrying in fright to a hiding place. Once they decided to die rather than live in such misery. But while they were debating how best to meet their death, they thought they heard a noise and in a flash were scampering off to the warren. On the way they passed a pond where a family of frogs was sitting among the reeds on the bank. In an instant, the startled frogs were seeking safety in the mud. "Look," cried a hare, "things are not so bad after all, for here are creatures who are afraid even of us." However unfortunate we may think we are, there is always someone worse off than ourselves.
One day, the hare and the tortoise decided to have a race. The hare was making fun of the tortoise. He said,
"You are so slow. It will take you days to reach anywhere."
"Is that so, you arrogant hare? Let's have a race and see who is faster."
The angry tortoise decided to challenge the hare and teach him a lesson. The hare was amused and looked at the whole thing as a joke. They decided on the racing path and chose the fox as the umpire. The rivals started as expected. The speedy hare soon left the tortoise far behind. Having reached halfway, the hare decided to take a break.
"What a lovely summer day it is. I will eat some grass and rest before I restart the race."
So he began to nibble on the green grass of the meadows. Soon after, he decided to take a nap. He thought,
"Even if the tortoise passes me, I will overtake him and reach the finish line. There's nothing to worry about with this slow tortoise."
The tortoise prodded on, unwavering, unhesitating, towards his goal in his resolve to beat the hare. The hare, in the meantime, had overslept. When he awoke, he realized that the tortoise had overtaken him by quite a distance. He cursed and ran as fast as he could. When he reached the finish line, the tortoise was already there, waiting for the hare's late arrival. The hare learned his lesson. Never make fun of anyone's weakness. Pride and arrogance will always lead to your downfall. The hare accepted his defeat graciously and apologized to the tortoise for his rude behavior.
The Donkey, Fox, and the Wolf. Once a young donkey was eating in the field. A fox saw the donkey and came closer.
Hi there. I've never seen you before. Who are you?
Hi, I carry heavy loads around here.
Oh, I see. What's your name?
My name? It's on my foot. Would you like to take a look?
If I lean over to take a look, he might just kick me. Never mind. I better get going now. What if the foolish wolf met him?
The fox went to the wolf right away.
I'm starving.
Hey, Wolf, you look so hungry. I think I just saw a young and chubby fellow over there.
Oh, really? I must go and see it. Hello? I'm a wolf. Who are you?
Hi, I carry heavy loads around here.
So, what's your name?
My name? It's on my foot. Would you like to take a look?
On your foot? Let's see.
Take this!
Ow! Ouch!
Thought you could eat me?
You foolish wolf! Oh! Hi there! Hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to our channel and be the first to see our newest videos. Click here to subscribe.
The Astronomer. An absent-minded astronomer was interested in nothing but simply staring and staring at the stars. Every night he would go out and he would look and study them in the sky. One evening he was walking along as usual, his head in the air and his eyes fixed on the stars. He didn't notice that there was a deep well in front of him. As he made his way along, he suddenly tripped and fell into the well. "Help!" he shouted. "Help me, someone!" He sat at the bottom of the well, soaked to the skin and calling for help. A passerby heard his shouts and peered down into the hole. "Please help me," begged the astronomer. "I was so busy studying the stars that I didn't notice the well." "That's your fault," the passerby told him. "You really should have looked where you were going." It's no use fixing our minds on higher things like the stars and the sky if we ignore what is going on around us. The Crab and his Mother. A crab lived with his mother at the bottom of the sea. The mother crab was very, very proud of her son, but she was always nagging and nagging at him to do better. One morning she noticed her son scuttling across the seabed in the sideways motion that crabs have. "I wish you would walk forwards," said the mother crab. "It would look so much nicer." "I will, mother," answered the son, "if you will show me how." The crab tried and tried and tried, but she found that she too could only walk sideways, as crabs can only walk sideways. And so she finally gave up and didn't criticize her son any longer. We should not criticize people for what is not their fault.
One day, a dog was wandering around looking for food. He spied a butcher's shop and went quickly in and stole a nice, fat, juicy bone from the shelf. Happily munching on the bone, he ran into the forest. He soon came across a bridge. As he crossed the bridge, he looked down into the river, and lo and behold, what did he see? He saw another dog, exactly like him, holding a bone in his mouth. The greedy dog decided that he wanted that bone too. So he growled, hoping that the other dog in the river would drop the bone out of fear. He would then grab the other bone and run away with 2 bones. But as he gave out a loud snarl to scare off the other dog, the bone fell from his mouth into the river, lost forever. The dog, in his greed, had mistaken his own reflection in the river for another dog carrying a bone. He realized his folly too late and walked away hungry and sad, but perhaps a little wiser.
The Farmer and His Sons. A father, being on the point of death, wished to be sure that his sons would give the same attention to his farm as he himself had given it. He called them to his bedside and said, "My sons, there is a great treasure hid in one of my vineyards." The sons, after his death, took their spades and mattocks and carefully dug over every portion of their land. They found no treasure, but the vines repaid their labor by an extraordinary and superabundant crop. Hard work brings its own rewards.
Little Red Riding Hood. There was once a sweet little girl who lived in a pretty little cottage at the end of the village. She always wore a red cloak with a hood, so people called her Little Red Riding Hood. One morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother said, "Put on your things and go to see your grandmother. She has been ill. Take along this basket with food for her." It was a bright and sunny morning, so Little Red Riding Hood stopped to pick a bunch of flowers for her grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood wandered from her path, when from behind her a gruff voice said, "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood." Little Red Riding Hood turned around and saw a great big wolf. "Where are you going, Little Red Riding Hood?" "I am going to my grandmother, who is ill, Mr. Wolf." Then Mr. Wolf said, "Good morning," and set off. After walking for a while, the wolf reached Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother's house. He opened the door and walked in where the grandmother lay in bed. He made one jump at her, but she jumped out of bed and into a closet. So the wolf put on the cap which she had dropped and crept under the bedclothes. In a short while, Little Red Riding Hood knocked at the door and walked in saying, "Good morning, grandmother. I have brought you food, and here is a bunch of flowers I gathered in the wood." As she came nearer to the bed, she said, "Why, grandmother, what a big mouth you have." "All the better to eat you up with, my dear," he said, as he sprang at Little Red Riding Hood. Just at that moment, 2 hunters were passing by the cottage and heard her scream. They rushed in and killed the wolf, and everybody was happy that Little Red Riding Hood had been saved. And Little Red Riding Hood learnt her lesson. Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. Once upon a time, in a large forest, stood the cottage where the teddy bear family lived. Father Bear was very big. Mother Bear was middling in size, and only Baby Bear was a real teddy bear. Each bear had its own bed. Father Bear's bed was very big. Mother Bear's bed was middling in size, while Baby Bear had a very little bed. Beside the fireplace around which the family sat stood a large carved chair for Father Bear, a lovely blue velvet armchair for Mother Bear, and a very little chair for Baby Bear. Neatly laid out on the table stood 3 bowls, a large one for Father Bear, a smaller one for Mother Bear, and a little bowl for Baby Bear. Not far from their cottage lived a little fair-haired girl, but she was haughty and stuck up. One day Mother Bear made a nice porridge. When it was ready, she said to the family, "It has to be left to cool now, otherwise it will taste horrible. That will take at least an hour. Why don't we go out?" Father Bear and Baby Bear would much rather have eaten the porridge, warm or not, but they went out with Mother Bear. A short time later, the little girl, whose name was Goldilocks, passed by the bear's house. "Oh, what an ugly house the bears have," said Goldilocks. "I'm going to look inside. It won't be beautiful like my house, but I'm dying to see where the bears live." Knock, knock. The little girl tapped on the door. Knock, knock. Not a sound. So Goldilocks went inside the house and saw the 3 bowls on the table. This is porridge," she said, dipping her finger into the bowl. She left the bowl empty on a messy table and went on exploring. "Now then, this must be Father Bear's chair. This will be Mother Bear's chair, and this one must belong to Baby Bear. I'll just sit on it a while." With these words, Goldilocks sat herself down onto the little chair, which promptly broke. Goldilocks crashed to the floor, but she didn't care, and she went upstairs. There was no mistaking which was Baby Bear's bed. This is so comfortable," she said, bouncing on it. Then she yawned. "I think I'll lie down, only for a minute, just to try the bed." And, in next to no time, Goldilocks lay fast asleep in Baby Bear's bed. In the meantime, the bears were on their way home. "Hurry," said Father Bear. "Someone's in our house. I can see the door open." And then he went into the kitchen and found that someone had eaten all the porridge. "Someone's been jumping up and down on my armchair," complained Mother Bear. "And someone's broken my chair," wailed Baby Bear. Who could it be? They ran upstairs and tiptoed in amazement over to Baby Bear's bed. In it lay Goldilocks, sound asleep. Baby Bear prodded her. "Who's that? Where am I?" shrieked the little girl, waking up with a start. Taking fright at the scowling faces of the bears bending over her, she clutched the bedclothes up to her chin. Then she jumped out of bed and fled down the stairs. "Oh, I have to go home," she told herself as she ran, forgetful of all the trouble she had so unkindly caused. But Baby Bear called her from the door, waving his arm. "Don't run away. Come back and play with me." From that day onwards, haughty, rude Goldilocks became a pleasant little girl. She made friends with Baby Bear and often went to his house to play. The Frogs and the Ox. An ox came down to a reedy pool to drink. As he splashed heavily into the water, he crushed a young frog into the mud. The old frog soon missed the little one and asked his brothers and sisters what had become of him. "A great big monster," said one of them, "stepped on little brother with one of his huge feet." "Big, was he?" said the old frog, puffing herself up. "Was he as big as this?" "Oh, much bigger," they cried. The frog puffed up still more. "He could not have been bigger than this," she said. But the little frogs all declared that the monster was much, much bigger, and the old frog kept puffing herself out more and more until, all at once, she exploded. Do not attempt the impossible. The Fairy. Once upon a time, there was a widow who had 2 daughters. The elder was so much like her, both in looks and character, that whoever saw the daughter saw the mother. They were both so disagreeable and so proud that it was impossible to live with them. The younger, who was the very picture of her father, was one of the most beautiful girls ever seen. As people naturally love their own likeness, this mother doted on her elder daughter, and at the same time had a great aversion for the younger. She made her eat in the kitchen and work continually. Among other things, this unfortunate child had to go twice a day to draw water more than 1.5 miles from the house, and bring home a pitcher full of it. One day, as she was at this fountain, there came to her a poor woman who begged of her to let her drink. "Oh yes, of course," said this pretty little girl. So she took some of the best, clearest water from the fountain and gave it to her. The good woman, having drunk, said to her, "You are so pretty and so good that I cannot help giving you a gift." For this was a fairy who had taken the form of a poor country woman to see how far the good manners of this pretty girl would go. "I will give you a gift," continued the fairy, "that at every word you speak, there shall come out of your mouth either a flower or a jewel." When this pretty girl returned, her mother scolded at her for staying so long at the fountain. "I beg your pardon, mother," said the poor girl. And in speaking these words, there came out of her mouth 2 roses, 2 pearls, and 2 large diamonds. "What is it I see there?" said her mother, quite astonished. "I think pearls and diamonds come out of the girl's mouth. How happens this, my child?" So the girl told her the story of the old woman. "Truly," cried the mother, "I must send my own dear child there." So the other girl went, but grumbled all the way, taking with her the best silver tankard in the house. She no sooner reached the fountain that she saw coming out of the wood a magnificently dressed lady, who came up to her and asked to drink. This was the same fairy who had appeared to her sister, but she had now taken the air and dress of a princess, to see how far this girl's rudeness would go. "Did I come here to serve you with water, pray? I suppose this silver tankard was brought purely for your fancy, was it? However, you may drink out of it if you want," said the proud, ill-bred girl. "You are not polite," answered the fairy without anger. "Well then, since you are so disobliging, I will give you a gift. At every word you speak, there shall come out of your mouth a snake or a toad." So soon as her mother saw her coming, she cried out, "Well, daughter?" "Well, mother," answered the unhappy girl, drawing out of her mouth a snake and a toad. "Oh, mercy!" cried the mother. "What is it I see? It is her sister who has caused all this, but she shall pay for it." And immediately she ran to beat her. The poor child fled away from her and went to hide herself in the forest nearby. The king's son, who was returning home, met her, and seeing her so beautiful, asked her what she did there alone and why she cried. "Alas, sir, my mother has turned me out of the house." The king's son, who saw 5 or 6 pearls and as many diamonds come out of her mouth, desired her to tell him how that happened. She told him the whole story. The king's son fell in love with her, and, considering that such a gift was worth more than any marriage portion another bride could bring, conducted her to the palace of the king, his father, and there married her, and they lived happily ever after.
The Ant and the Dove. Once upon a time, a very thirsty ant was drinking water from the river. Suddenly, the ant lost his balance and fell into the river water. "Help! Help! Help!" cried the ant, but no one could hear his cries. A dove, sitting on a tree nearby, saw that the ant was in trouble. She quickly plucked off a leaf from the tree and dropped it into the water. "Help!" The ant climbed on the leaf. He thanked the dove for saving his life. After a few days, the dove was sitting on a tree. The ant saw a hunter aiming his arrow at the dove. The ant knew that his friend the dove was in danger. He quickly bit the hunter's leg. The hunter cried in pain. "Ouch!" The hunter's arrow missed the dove. This time, the ant saved the dove. The dove thanked the ant for saving her life, and they became friends forever. Moral of the story: one good deed deserves another.
Now we'll listen to the story of a goat and a fox. Now we'll
The Fisherman. The birds. The birds, the beasts, and the bat. Many years ago, the birds and the beasts declared war against each other. No compromise was possible, and so they went at it. It was a terrible battle, and many animals died. Now, the bat had not openly joined either group, as he did not want to be caught on the losing side. So, when the birds asked which side he was on, the bat quickly replied, "I have wings. I am on your side, of course." And when the beasts asked who he supported, the bat responded, "With my sharp teeth and fur, it is obvious I am on the side of the beasts." The truth of it was that he did little to help either group, spending most of his time telling tales about the other. When the battle was over, the conduct of the bat was discussed at the peace conference. The birds and the beasts all turned angrily against the bat when they realized how many times the bat had changed sides and spread rumors. Since then, the bat lives in fear of the beasts and of the birds, hiding in dark towers and deserted ruins, flying out only into the night. Don't forget, the deceitful have no friends.
Once upon a time, there lived a mighty lion. He had ruled as king of the jungle for several years. There were secret rumors that the old lion was now frail and sick. Confined to his den, he made an announcement to his subjects.
My dear old animals, I have served faithfully as your king for a long time. Now I am old and looking for a successor. Anyone wishing to pay homage to me should feel free to come to my den at any time.
Many of the animals went in, not only to meet their old king, but also hoping that they could impress him enough to be chosen as the next leader of the jungle. The only animal that stayed away from the mighty lion's den was the fox. The lion, noticing his absence, sent one of his jackals to the fox.
Please tell the fox that he should show the respect and charity due to the king of the jungle. He should visit me in my den, just like the rest of the animals.
The jackal left the den and ran to see the fox. The fox told the jackal, "Please offer my sincere respect to our king. Also, tell him that there has been more than one occasion when I have come to see him at his abode."
Why did you not come to see him this time?
Asked the surprised jackal. My dear jackal, when I approached the den, I observed the footprints of the other animals. The footprints all pointed inwards, but there were none coming out. Since I was unable to get a satisfactory explanation for this unusual happening, I decided to forego the visit to the lion. The jackal, impressed by the fox's wit, walked away. The truth was that the lion was too old and frail to hunt for his food. Using his illness as bait, he would call the animals to his den and make them his easy prey.
The Ant and the Grasshopper. One beautiful summer day, a lazy grasshopper was sitting and enjoying the sun, just as he did every day. Then a hard-working ant passed by, bearing along with great effort an ear of corn that he was taking to his nest. "Why don't you come and chat with me?" asked the grasshopper, "instead of working all day?" "I am saving food for the winter season," said the ant. "I think you should do the same. What will you eat when the weather gets cold? How will you feed your hungry household?" The grasshopper laughed and said, "You are always in such a hurry. Why do you always work and worry?" "Why bother about the winter now?" said the grasshopper. "We have got plenty of food at present." But the ant was very wise and didn't pay attention to Grasshopper's words. He continued to work hard and stored enough food for the winter. The winter came sooner than expected. The grasshopper couldn't even find a place to stay and anything to eat. He went to the ant's house and begged him for food and shelter. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you," the ant said. "I only have room and food for my family. So go and find help somewhere else." "I should have followed the ant's example," the grasshopper said sadly. So, children, the moral of this story is, there's a time for work and there's a time for play. If you play during the time you were supposed to work, then be ready to face the consequences.
One day, a weasel pounced on a bat. The bat, scared for his life, begged the weasel to let him go.
"Please, dear sir, let me go. I beg you. I have a family, a wife, and 2 children."
The weasel held the bat firmly and said,
"Oh no, you do not get away from me. I do not like birds like you."
The bat pretended to be hurt and said,
"Dear weasel, I'm no bird. You offend me with that statement. I am from the same family as you. Look at my body. I too am a mouse."
The weasel looked at the bat and reluctantly allowed him to go. A few days later, the same bat was caught by another weasel. The bat begged for mercy.
"Please, dear weasel, let me go, I beg you."
The weasel had no liking for mice and said,
"No way, I do not like mice. I will not let you go."
The clever but devious bat adapted to the situation quickly, saying,
"I'm not a mouse. Look, I have wings. I can fly. I'm a bird."
Once again, the bat was set free by the weasel. Thinking on his feet and improvising has saved the bat from 2 tough situations.
The boy was hovering about the kitchen. he noticed a jar of hazelnuts on the table.
May I have some hazelnuts, Mum?
Of course, dear. Take him one from the jar. The boy dipped his hand into the jar and gathered a fist of hazelnuts. He tried to pull out his fist, but he was unable to do it. He began to cry, and his mother came to see what was wrong.
My hand is stuck and I can't move it,
cried the boy. Leave half of the nuts in the jar, said his mother. The boy let some of the hazelnuts fall back into the jar. Now he could pull out his hand. You were greedy. Shame on you, scolded his mother. She put away the jar of hazelnuts. Moral: sometimes less is more.
It was a cold winter day. A goat herd had taken his goats to the meadow, when suddenly there was a snowstorm. The goat herd quickly drove his goats to a cave in a rock face for warmth and shelter. It so happened that some wild goats had already taken shelter in that cave. While they were all gathered together, the goat herd got the chance to see the wild goats. In comparison to his herd, these wild ones were bigger and more beautiful. Their sheer size and superior beauty left the goat herder in awe. All the food that the goat herder had collected, he gave it all to the wild goats because he was so fascinated by their beauty. The storm lasted for several days, and the tame goats that were not given any food soon began to die of hunger. As soon as the sun rose again and the storm settled, the goat herd was ready to leave the cave with his new herd of beautiful goats. But alas, once free to go, the wild goats ran off. The foolish goat herder was left alone and had to go back home without any goat. He was laughed at by all his fellow men for his folly.
Once upon a time, there was a greedy fox. One day, he did not find any food. He was very hungry. I want food, said the fox. He saw a bunch of grapes hanging from a vine. His mouth watered. I want to eat these grapes. He jumped and jumped, but he could not reach the grapes. He jumped and jumped. Soon he grew tired, so he said, I don't want these sour grapes. Chee, and went back into the jungle.
Once there were two good friends named Ron and John, who decided to travel and see the world together. One day, they decided to go to the forest. The forest was so dense that they knew anything dangerous could happen to them at any time. So they promised each other that they would remain united in any case of danger. Suddenly, they heard a loud growling sound, and they saw a large bear approaching them. They got very scared. Ron quickly ran at once and climbed a nearby tree, leaving John behind. John did not know how to climb the tree. He asked Ron,
"Can you help me climb the tree? The bear will eat me up. Help me, please." "I cannot come down. The bear is approaching, and there's no place up here. Go and find a place for yourself to hide."
Ron did not help John, but John was a smart boy. In school, he had heard a teacher saying that the bear doesn't eat dead creatures. Now, led by his common sense, he laid down flat on the ground, breathless, pretending to be a dead man. The bear came near the man lying on the ground. It smelt in his ears and slowly left the place, because bears do not touch dead creatures. After the bear went away, the friend on the tree came down and asked his friend John,
"What did the bear whisper into your ear?" "The bear advised me not to believe a false friend who leaves you in time of danger."
The Bear and the Bees. A hungry bear was wandering in the forest in search of food. On the way, he came across a tree on which a honeycomb was hanging. The bear was delighted to see the honeycomb. He cautiously went closer and sniffed. In fact, the bear was trying to find out whether the bees were present there or had gone out to collect the honey. That very moment, a bee returned from outside after collecting honey. The bee sensed the danger, and so he immediately stung sharply on the nose of the bear before disappearing from there. The bear cried with pain. In fury, without thinking much, he raised his forelimbs and tried to destroy the honeycomb with his claws. As he touched the comb, thousands of bees came out and attacked on him. The poor bear fled from there as fast as his legs could carry him. They followed him with great speed. Finally, the bear could save himself from those menacing bees only by jumping into the forest water pool. Moral: it is always better to bear a little suffering.
The goose that laid golden eggs. One day, a poor farmer suddenly got a goose. It was a special goose that laid one golden egg every day.
My heavens! This is unbelievable! The egg is gold! Ha ha ha!
The poor farmer decided to sell the eggs. And soon after, he became rich.
That's a good goose! Keep laying those golden eggs!
The farmer became very greedy. He was now already rich, but he wanted to become even richer.
How come the goose lays only one egg a day? There's no way I'm going to become really rich like this. There must be a way to collect a bunch of golden eggs at one time.
The farmer became so greedy that all he thought about was getting richer.
Ooh! I bet there are a bunch of golden eggs inside the goose's belly. I bet if I cut open its belly, I could get them all out at once.
So the greedy farmer cut open the goose's belly, but there were no golden eggs inside. In fact, there was nothing inside.
Oh, how could I have been so foolish? My greed has caused me to lose everything now.
At that moment, the farmer understood what he had done, but it was too late, because the goose was now dead, and there were no more golden eggs.
Oh, my poor eggs!
The Crow and the Pitcher. A crow, half dead with thirst, came upon a pitcher which had once been full of water. But when the crow put its beak into the mouth of the pitcher, he found that only very little water was left in it, and that he could not reach far enough down to get at it. He tried, and he tried, but at last had to give up in despair. Then a thought came to him, and he took a pebble and dropped it into the pitcher. Then he took another pebble and dropped it into the pitcher. Then he took another pebble and dropped that into the pitcher. Then he took another pebble and dropped that into the pitcher. Then he took another pebble and dropped that into the pitcher. Then he took another pebble and dropped that into the pitcher. At last, he saw the water mount up near him, and after casting in a few more pebbles, he was able to quench his thirst and save his life. Little by little does the trick.